Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in for chapter 255 of My Hero Academia on Viz. Woo, great. Alright, very quickly, if anyone's been watching the live streams, you probably know I'm super ill. I'm getting better. Just maybe a few more days of rest and recovery and I'll be back and good and ready to go. Anyway, this week's chapter of Hero Academia. Okay, so for this one, not my favorite of the last 5 chapters. Not really. When I look at this chapter, it's actually kind of interesting how last chapter was so emotional, and then you come into this chapter and I think like within a third of the chapter, you kind of just go back to the status quo. Like you are at a really emotional high in the last chapter, and then this chapter just, when it comes to the Aizawa Kurogiri plotline, it just feels anticlimactic. Partly due to Kurogiri's nature and Aizawa's nature. Like Aizawa very quickly gets himself under control, and then you have some kind of awkward panels in there, and then Kurogiri also is under control because of the Nomu nature. It ends up being a very anticlimactic, emotionally anticlimactic. It goes to that high, and then it's like it's doing all right, it's coming down, but then it just goes to a sudden and a sudden abrupt flatline. It was really interesting in terms of looking at it, but when you look at the chapter and ultimately what you get out of the Kurogiri plotline, I do appreciate what the author was doing, because I do think this is one of the safest ways of going about Kurogiri Shirakumo type thing. I think this is like a one word answer. I think is fair enough. I think that is stable, but you look at the chapter, you realize that it's a setup chapter because the information that these guys get is not enough for them. And then you have Hawks coming in. And when you have so much going on here, it makes the next events feel kind of shaky. And what I mean is, like, you have a situation where Aizawa comes in specifically to see if they can pull out some information. They pull out specifically one word out of Kurogiri. They pass that one word up the chain of command. The chain of command receives a phone call, and then there is a request for a rescue at a hospital, to which then Hawks gets clued in on, and then he just says no, he can't do it right now. And then Hawks plays the grandmaster schemer behind the scenes that makes it feel like this is being set up now. Specifically with Hawks too, when he's having his moment in the chapter, it gives you the feeling that he knows about the hospital, but he needed to wait for the other people to find out about the hospital before anything went down. Like, he couldn't feed them the information, and to some degree that's probably justified. Can't feed him the information because he's being monitored, but Hawks has been able to get information out before to Endeavor. So given that he's so clever, right? Like, I feel like you could justify him cleverly giving away information. Anyway, we'll like walk through it. It's just like when you look at the convolution here, there's a lot of convoluted maneuvers here. It's really interesting that the hospital line was enough for the narrative to move forward into the next portion of the story. I feel like it's kind of shaky on the first and second read through. So let's go through another read through and see how this works out. But yeah, in terms of just the general overview, it's pretty much a setup chapter. It turns into a setup chapter. You have like some kind of resolution from the Kurogiri thing, and then you go up into setting up how the pieces are coming into play. I mean, like, when you quite literally have Hawks talking about the pieces are coming together, it's a setup chapter. It's so convoluted in terms of how the author went about putting this together. I think there are better ways of doing this. Aizawa got some kind of resolution in all this, so that's probably the good thing. And we also did get like a nice little one for all for one thing. Anyway, let's just get into it. For the first page, we just have pretty much a recap of last week's material. Quite sincerely, there's nothing really important in the first 2/3 of the page. I think the one thing of value is really the last panel on that first page that has Aizawa featured in it, specifically where Aizawa is acknowledging that that's his friend's corpse. I think this is really good because you don't want to have Aizawa feeling or attributing more to Kurogiri than what Kurogiri is. It's good that Aizawa is seeing that thing as his friend's corpse as opposed to his friend, because that does inform you of the emotional detachment going on with Aizawa. And, you know, that is actually probably like a really good indicator for later on in the chapter when Aizawa is so under control. There is some kind of emotional distance here. And the author did do a few things with Aizawa to show that there was emotional distance into the problem. Anyway, we go into the second page. The second page features Aizawa's rapid fire questioning. And, you know, when you have Aizawa asking who did this to you, where did they tinker with your head? Well, now you know this is probably the questions that he was able to pick up on. And this is probably why he said the hospital. So he was answering one of Aizawa's questions. I think that's fair to say there. Anyway, page 2 is just emotional drum up page, just making it a tense situation. I don't think the art for this week in terms of Aizawa was, or can really compete against last week's Aizawa art. I think last week's Aizawa art was really good. But this one was just, you know, they're writing off the momentum from the previous chapter, just going through, asking the questions to Kurogiri. Anyway, page 3 is another tense page. Really, the page itself, there's not much of value here other than to add weight to the situation. Like, it's a drama page. It's one of those pages that when it gets animated, it's going to be really good. It's going to have some music playing. It's going to be really intense. So really, it's an emotion page. If anyone is really feeling the emotion from these series of chapters, this is probably one of those pages that will get to you. But in terms of information coming out, nah, there's not really much information coming out of there. The only little neat thing is that Aizawa mentioned Class 2A. They were members of Class 2A. And that kind of makes sense as to why the author might have brought up Class 2A last week. I mean, like, why didn't they bring up Class 3A? Because, like, most likely Aizawa also had a hand in Class 3 at some point when they were Class 1. But it's probably just an issue of, you know, show Class 2A. They were members of Class 2A. It's just like a nice little nod, right? Kind of thing, maybe. It's probably more of a coincidence than anything else. But yeah, no. Page 3 is just continuing the build-up that Kurogiri, Aizawa questioning. We go into page 4-5, and page 4-5 is that wonderful shot of Kurogiri and the clouds forming Aizawa's friend. So when you look at it, like, this was the climax to the build-up from the previous pages. I do think that the look was pretty cool. I did think it was a pretty cool image. One thing that I think is absolutely hilarious though is that from the way that the people were talking, it seems like Oboro had molded his face using the mist. And so it's just really funny that when you look at his nose, he still has a little band-aid across his nose. It's like, wow, that is such a prominent character feature that they still have it. Like, that it's still showing up on his own created face. I think that was a little bit ridiculous, honestly. But that's how I interpret it. When you go into page 6, the guys are telling you that the shape of the fog was changing. So I don't think that's like actually his face. I really do think that's the fog creating the face. But you guys let me know what you think. I'm honestly not too sure how that one works out. If it's the fog is dissipating and so you can see his face in the background kinda, or if it's fog shaping going on. Anyway, the rest of page 6 is just Aizawa telling the guy to fight it. There's not really much information here other than the fact that Shirakumo is actually struggling there. And then we go into page 7, and page 7 is just Shirakumo remembering his past. So the valuable thing here is that there is some degree of memory within the mind of Kurogiri. It looks pretty pristine. It's really going to be tough seeing how the author wants to do this. In this chapter, he did give us a pretty good solution of, like, he doesn't have his full consciousness there. But I am kind of curious to what degree, how many memories does he actually have access to. Regardless, the reality is Kurogiri was able to tap into the Shirakumo memories, and that person's personality was able to come through long enough to be able to try and say Shota's name and also to say hospital. So pretty good stuff on that part. I will say though, you know, just hospital itself, like, I don't think it's not a very useful thing to get out of it, honestly. And the fact that this man was pilfered, you know, from the hospital, at the very least, the moment that you have grave robbing happening, The detective should have been thinking that a hospital's involved, like one of the hospitals is compromised, or maybe many hospitals are compromised. But this is one of those cases where, okay, at least we got like something we know is confirmed from the mouth of one of the actual villains. But it's just the hospital does feel really underwhelming. Still, they got something out of Kurogiri, right? When you're not really expecting much, there's a lot of, any little thing can be a pretty big victory. Anyway, we go into page 8, and page 8 is the Kurogiri explosion. Now, the most valuable thing in page 8 is, of course, the I am. So the reason that's important is because those are Shirakumo's final words for the chapter. What's also really good is that what the author did was that he was showing Kurogiri having that explosion and then fading to black. So I really like that. That's pretty much just saying that the consciousness has gone dark. I like how the author went about illustrating that. Now, because Kurogiri leaves off with saying I am, this is pretty much one of those cues to me that this isn't the last that we're going to hear of Shirakumo. His rhetoric about what he is, that's going to come back at some point later down the road. There's going to be another moment where Kurogiri is going to say that I am Shirakumo. It's going to be a big moment. The author's pretty much said it. This is his final words. Those words are going to come back. Pretty sure. I'm not, it's just like, that's just what happens with that type of line. We move into page 9. And page 9 is pretty much the transition page. It's a page pretty much telling us that we're ending the Aizawa President Mike involvement in this portion of the chapter because, well, as you saw on the page, Aizawa deactivates his quirk. There's like some rhetoric about his eyes being dried out, and also President Mike is just absolutely tired. And from there, we go into everyone leaving Tartarus. And this page has to put a lot of effort to pretty much sum up for the reader how the characters feel about the information that they got. And so in terms of an information heavy page, this is a good information page. So first valuable thing, the characters confirmed that they heard him say hospital. So thank God that wasn't just something that was missed. Thank God that they heard it. Second thing, Aizawa feels like they kind of wasted time, which they didn't. They got something out of him. And then also he referred to Kurogiri as Kurogiri and not his friend. This is really good because it just shows that the character is committing to putting distance between him and Kurogiri. And so with that kind of mindset, it's the kind of one that he's probably not going to fixate on it too much. Like this kind of thing, knowing that your dead friend is still technically kind of alive or is being held alive, yeah, pretty much. It's probably going to weigh on him. But the way that they're putting in this distance now does kind of like, it kind of reinforces that this isn't going to be the most idealistic solution. I'm still expecting Obero to come back at the pivotal moment and make one big game-changing move. But that's like, that could even happen in the final arc kind of thing. Anyway, the next bit of information that I think is really important is that we found out that, okay, Kurogiri legitimately shut down. It's like his programming has just short-circuited. It's a pretty nasty time, so they can't do any more on Kurogiri for the day. But then Gran Torino's coming in and saying that he felt that they made progress. So this is important. That's coming and countering what Aizawa felt about wasting time. No, like, Gran Torino is the old person here. He knows the game against All For One is a game made in snail's pace. So this is probably valuable for him all the way through. It just kind of goes to tell you that when it comes down to it, that's probably information that Tsukachi and Gran Torino can act on. Like, they're probably going to be super proactive about it. So you have a situation here where you have the proactive party and the party that's just going to be leaving the situation alone. It is really interesting because, Aizawa isn't wrapped up in the All For One rhetoric. That's pretty much the Gran Torino All Might Izuku territory. And it really comes out when you have Aizawa questioning what the normal really are, and he's questioning the nature of All For One. It's really interesting to see Aizawa getting so close to the All For One rhetoric. But at the end of the day, from the way that the author is setting up the writing between Gran Torino and Aizawa, it really doesn't seem like Aizawa is going to have a trajectory that's going to be crossing with All For One specifically. Anyway, We did have a pretty interesting thing that All for One says. It's like making wine, trampling the grapes to extract their juice. I merely wanted to keep enjoying those delightful flavors. So that's just pretty much telling you that All for One is a connoisseur. Pretty much that just tells you that with the way that you can almost see his eyes in that image and his smile, he's a guy that just wants to keep experimenting with all varieties of quirks. Like, he just wants to keep creating the ultimate quirk. So what you actually had here was that this foreshadows the rhetoric at the last page, because All for One is speaking about the joys of bringing quirks together, about trying things out with different quirks. You know, to what extent can his power increase? To what extent can they pull out power? What kind of horizons can they still see with all the different quirks that are in existence? That's pretty much the type of rhetoric that you can take away from All for One when he's talking about making wine. You gotta crush the grapes, but man, sometimes you're gonna get something that well, tastes really good. Anyway, we move on to page 12, and we have the final bit for Aizawa in the chapter, with Aizawa saying that he hopes that there's more progress. That was also a really weird image of Aizawa, in all honesty, on that page. I guess just to show you like how beat up he is throughout all of that. Anyway, from there we get like the really interesting just game of telephone that occurs with them sending it up the chain of command and sending it out to hospital. Then you have the girl over at the business place, sorry, at the Hero Tower, public safety office maybe, getting some kind of message, and then there's another message about a disturbance at the hospital, and then you have Hawks, and well, that, you know, that was an interesting whole little process. When I was first reading it, I didn't fully understand what was going on. Like, you know, what was the girl picking up? Was she actually picking up Sukachi? Was that the message that they got? And then all of a sudden we go to the hospital and there's the disturbance at a very specific hospital, and they're requesting rescue. So that was really interesting, just how that kind of escalated. There is definitely a strange escalation occurring there. And then we, you know, when you go over into the Hawks bit, the Hawks bit is really amusing, honestly. Like, I was looking at it and I took so long trying to read what they were saying, but it's like, little late to ask about this stuff. Liberation Army facts. It's absolutely hilarious and adorable that Hawks is teaching twice in such a simplified way. Come on, that is cute. That is so cute. Anyway, here's where we get the whole thing with Hawks. Him saying the hospital, the pieces are in place. All that remains is to, and then, you know, the chapter cuts off there because the author is drumming up suspense. Honestly, with the way that those final 3 pages went about unfolding, it pretty much seems like Hawks needed things to get into a spot where the heroes knew what was going on. They found out what was going on. Somehow Wakagumo Hospital is requesting rescue. So I can only assume that's because of Shigaraki's thing that's going on in there. And so someone probably heard the craziness that's happening at the hospital. They phoned in the heroes, and now the heroes are going to a hospital. So when I see Hawk saying the pieces are in place, it really does seem like he's saying, okay, great. They now know the hospital that is the problem. They can now mount an attack on the hospital and take out Shigaraki. That's how I'm pretty much reading that little bit there. And that's the real big thing there. If this whole line, disturbance over at Wakakumo Hospital, if that line is coming out specifically because of the thing occurring to Shigaraki, because he is laughing like a maniac in a public hospital, then it makes that whole little bit with Aizawa and Kurogiri seem like a little bit of a waste, because ultimately that information, you know, it's not useful. It seems like this is a situation where the characters found out about hospital, but then Shigaraki's big mouth is what actually gave them the information of a disturbance at Wakakumo Hospital. So if we're trying to say, like, if we're trying to find a way to make that worthwhile, the author could spin it in like, okay, there is a disturbance occurring at a hospital that they let Hawks know about it, and now this lady has information about hospital being a keyword, and she could think, well, if we're going to be going to hospitals, we might as well be careful because we know that is a keyword from a Nomu. So that's like the way that you can make everything here useful. But the construction of the scene, honestly, the construction of how that all went down, it might also be a problem with the translation, that it's not the clearest thing in the world. It's not the neatest implementation ever. Like, honestly, not at all. It's not a neat implementation. It kind of feels like when you look at the rest of the chapter, you're kind of meandering for the majority of the chapter. And then when you come to the final 3 pages, all of a sudden the pacing is out of control, crazy, that you can't follow what's really going on there. Like, things aren't super clear. So, you know, in terms of construction, not my favorite chapter at all. I think this could have been done better. I think you could have taken out one of the pages of Aizawa yelling at Kurogiri and just had another page just properly explaining what message the lady got, what message the lady sent over to Hawks. Hawks' page itself, though, the Hawks page is fine. It's just really the transition. The transition is just, it's really, it's all over the place. Well, it quite literally is going from different settings in one page. Anyway, on the doctor's page, I think is also worthwhile. The biggest thing now, because the game is moving towards a hospital, the fact that Hawks is talking about a hospital, I'm just questioning. I guess All for One didn't get the doctor a great lab, pretty much, because he's working at a public hospital. So that's really interesting to me, in all honesty, that the doctor isn't in his underground lair, like he's actually at a public hospital. I'm curious. I wanted to see if we actually are in a public hospital. But it's just like the Kurogiri stuff and his hospital keyword wouldn't make sense unless this was occurring at a public hospital. Because how are they going to find Shigaraki? It has to be a public hospital, which just makes things kind of weird. I mean, like, it's just an issue of, I would have thought that All for One had this guy's lab set up somewhere else. It may also be a situation that All for One just bought out the hospital that this guy works at. But the reality, for some reason, there's a disturbance at Wagakumo Hospital and someone's requesting rescue. So clearly they don't have like good sound dampening technology here. Anyway, the actual stuff to Shigaraki, as you can see, he is laughing crazy like a madman. It looks pretty cool. Looks pretty badass. I think this is great. There is some interesting stuff in the dialogue there. A man who possesses ultimate power, the ultimate being sought after by All for One and myself. My masterpiece, you're even more perfect than expected, Tomura Shigaraki. Now that's interesting. You want to know what's really interesting about that whole thing? Is that they're calling him a man who possesses unlimited power, sought after by All for One and myself. You're even more perfect than expected. You know, when you see that kind of stuff there, this reeks of Shigaraki having a quality that made him a great material. Because when you're saying something like you're even more perfect than expected, that means that they had some kind, like Shigaraki had some kind of value before this treatment started occurring to him. And so the rhetoric here is super interesting, because when you put sought after by All for One and myself, that I feel like that is speaking specifically to a quality that Shigaraki had before All for One's interference, because that's like what the point of sought after. There was something specifically that All for One was looking for that Shigaraki had prior to the whole thing going down. So at that point, I do want to bring your attention back to chapter 246, because I remember that during one of the live streams, people were confused about All for One wanting One for All when I thought it was like super clear. And truthfully, it is clear. When you go back to 246, you have them talking about Shigaraki having to endure hellish agony for the next 4 months. Then you have the lines, but if you can overcome it, you'll find that you have everything in the palm of your hand, even One for All. And then Shigaraki's asking about one for all, and then the guy's like, yeah, out of everything that All for One sought for, it was the one power that didn't behave as he saw fit. So pretty much when you have that kind of thing there, it's like they want to get Shigaraki to a point that he can have one for all in his hand. And that is a power that even All for One couldn't deal with properly. So when you consider that one for all is one of the things that Shigaraki can acquire here, or, you know, when you consider that one for all is like a goal that All for One is setting up, and it has the distinction of being the power that he couldn't manipulate properly, it really just tells me that Shigaraki probably has one for all. And that's why this whole rhetoric is occurring. All for One was specifically looking for someone with one for all, and then he got Shigaraki. And the way that this pretty much works is that I don't... How would I say it? No. I feel like it is very likely that Nana passed down one for all to her offspring, but she didn't pass it down in the way that one for all is transmitted. She passed down one for all in terms of just genetics. Like, she passed down the capacity to give away your quirk and to accumulate power. So quite literally, Shigaraki at this point would have the quirk to give away your quirk and the quirk to stockpile. So he has a stockpile of 0. There's no buildup in there, but he has the capacity to start a stockpile kind of thing. That's what I think's going on. It's just like when you consider that this guy was saying that Shigaraki can have everything in his hand, even one for all, and when you have that distinction being made that All for One couldn't get his hands on one for all, it only makes sense that Shigaraki has one for all. Like, where is that going to come from? I doubt they're going to be able to steal it from Izuku, so I feel like there is a copy of one for all within Shigaraki. And the big thing here is that since we know Monoma can copy one for all, it does show that it is technically possible for a one for all without the stockpile to exist. Given that Monoma can make a copy of the quirk without a problem, I don't see any reason why the quirk can't be passed on just by general genetics. All you have to do is remove the accumulated aspect of the quirk, and there you go. The capacity to have a one for all stockpile is being passed on. That's what I think when I see the rhetoric that the Doctor is engaging in here. But I would love to know your thoughts. At this point, that's just like an educated guess based on some of the dialogues here. In terms of how confident I feel about it, I feel like 60%. It's just like, what other qualities is Shigaraki gonna have that make him more perfect than expected? The fact that they're talking about expected means that the Doctor had readings on Shigaraki. He had a specific idea about how things were going to go down, and whatever Shigaraki has is even better than the Doctor thought. Now, mind you, like, when we're looking at this stuff too, we also have to consider that the rhetoric with the Doctor is about upgrading bodies so that the bodies can handle all the different quirks because of quirk singularity. And in that case, well, I mean, yeah, there's not many innate qualities someone could have before doing this process that would make that easier, you know? Make surviving whatever is going on to Shigaraki here easier. Regardless, it's a pretty hardcore page. Guys, let me know what you thought down below. I don't really have anything else to say for this chapter. Might also be because I'm just a little bit tired from the illness. But yeah, this was a setup chapter. The next chapter, I guess the name of the game is going to be seeing if the heroes are going to be mounting an assault on the hospital or if they're going to walk in blind. Shigaraki is still in the danger zone. Like, Shigaraki still has months to go through to get set up with this new power and all that. But we'll have to see. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.